Matt. Welcome back.
Yeah, big surprise. I had no idea Visual Basic was used for Unreal. That's a good one.
Oh yeah.
Go figure.
So we have actually Matt here for the reason. So Matt is ready to do a small demo.
Yeah, so I'm one of the developer advocates for Rider and a bunch of other stuff and everything. And I thought I'd show you some tips and tricks of Rider for GameDev. I can take a look at some Unreal stuff, on Unity stuff. And since we've got a nice audience here as well, if there are any questions, anybody asking for some interesting tips or tricks, then please fire away, send me some questions, and we'll try and answer them. And of course, with you two here as well, you two know Rider very well too. So if you see me doing anything wrong, or if you see any other tips or tricks that I could throw in,
we'll throw
please
tomatoes.
Fire away. Don't throw. Be nice. Be nice. Don't tell me off or anything.
Joking. Okay, share the screen and go on with the demo.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Where's? Oh, I thought I already had shared my screen. It's gone. 1 second. Sorry.
Sure.
Oh, that's what I did. I pressed the wrong button and got rid of it. There we go. Okay, so there we go. We have Rider. We have two instances of Rider running here. No, I'm still in the wrong window. I have Rider showing a Unity game and a Rider showing an Unreal game. So if we just stick with Unity to start with. If you're not already familiar with Rider, it's the kind of IDE that you'd expect it to be. We've got the project view on the left-hand side here. We can view all the files that are related to your project and open those up in the editor as you'd expect. When we're talking about Unity, we show the project as a Unity view here. So we've got your assets, and if I just close that down a minute, we can see assets and packages, and you can open those out, and you can navigate around and go find your source files and open them as well. First tip I'm going to show you though is 2 keyboard shortcuts, and these keyboard shortcuts are really important. And if you get these, you can really pretty much go and do anything. The first one is Shift, and this is search everywhere, and will get you to anything there. Doesn't matter which key map you're using for this either, because this will just work across all the key maps. Shift is really useful. You then just start typing. So if I want to go to the main menu, I'm going to start typing main menu, and it will search for all the things that are associated with main menu: file names, symbols like class names, and other things as well. So let's just go straight to the type, and that will then navigate me straight there. It's really useful. Shift, and then start typing. You don't have to type the full name. You can do things like TDISS to get to the Tower Defense Input Scheme Switcher. This is a great way of navigating around your code, because quite often you give class names which are sort of lots of different words stuck together, and you quite often get a very unique set of characters there. So it's very quick and easy to jump around your code just by doing TDISS and what have you. Once you're in a file like this, you've got syntax highlighting, you've got all the sort of things you'd expect. You can fold your code and collapse things down, all this kind of stuff. But you'll notice there's lots of squiggly lines here as well. And again, if you're not familiar with Rider or the other sort of IntelliJ-based IDEs, these are the inspections that we run on your code. So we index your code, we'll check all your code there, learn what's going on, and use that index to run analysis on stuff. So we can look for problems with your code or give you suggestions, and it can be a whole bunch of things. It can be things like there might be a null exception here, or it can be things like, if we have a look at that return there, we've got, say, an inconsistent body style. So we want to try and help you write better code, write code with less problems in it, but also keep you sort of nice and consistent. You've got lots of writing the normal sort of style. It's also useful, especially with things like with Unity, to help you bring your C# level up to date. So this one here, for example, there's nothing wrong with this code here. It's fine to have a getter like that with a return statement here, but more modern C# can write your code a bit more tersely and use the arrow syntax there to provide a simple getter. We've got other things here like, we can make this item private, and there it's also telling us that we're not matching naming rules there, so it might want us to capitalize that I. We've got another inspection at the top here. What's someone saying? Got virtual members but no inheritors. Okay, well then Oh yes, the second keyboard shortcut, that's the whole point of this. The second keyboard shortcut, Alt-Enter, it's our doing action there. So once you've done Shift to find something, we've got our inspections. You can then use Alt-Enter to make these quick fixes and to automatically rewrite the code once we have found these problems or issues or suggestions for your code there. So I can do Alt-Enter on this particular one here to say we've got virtual members, nobody's inheriting it, we don't need them to be virtual. And here it's actually suggesting that we can make the whole class sealed. And if we open that up as well, we can actually run this quick fix across the whole solution as well. I'm going to do it with this one file, but if we do that, it'll very quickly rewrite the code for us. We can see the markers on the side here giving us the difference of what's actually been changed in the code as well. So we've got version control built in, which is really nice. And so it's good. And it's like actually, I can roll those back very easily or undo them and so on. So the two keyboard shortcuts you want is Shift and Alt-Enter. If I just pop back over to here as well, there's no squiggly inspection going on here, but there are still things we can do from Alt-Enter, which is really useful. So we've got context actions that are available as well. So it depends where you put the the text cursor. So I'm on the name of the class there, Alt-Enter, and I can then quickly change that to be an internal class or a public class, or I can create a default constructor. I can even create a factory method as well if I wanted to, or make it into a partial class, and we can then start to make more interesting stuff going on as well. We can navigate about things. We can navigate up and down the type hierarchy. So I can see what this derives from. I can see that I'm deriving it from input scheme switcher, and we get to see this item here. But the other key thing to show here is these last items down here: navigate, refactor, inspect, and generate. These are the entry points into pretty much all of the functionalities that Rider has available to you. So you can use this navigate to, which gives you a nice context menu of all the things you can navigate to from this particular class name. So things like base symbols, who it's derived from. And we can see it derives from input scheme switcher, mono behavior, and ultimately object. And in fact, we can even navigate to mono behavior, and Rider will decompile it on the fly. And so you can actually see what the code is of mono behavior. We can do things like find usages as well. That one's not going to be particularly useful on the class name, so I'll come back to that one. Related files derive symbols as well. So if there were classes deriving from it, this is a sealed class, that's not going to happen. Usages. So let's just go and find something which can do as usages. So our paused function there, if I go to navigate to and find usages, then Rider will very quickly show me that it's only used in one place. So that would be better. It can give you a big list and allow you to navigate around your code and find things. Other useful things in here, the refactoring, so we can do automated refactorings on your code. So there's lots of different things you can do there. The simplest and most useful of these, or the one which is probably most used, is the rename refactoring. So we can actually rename your code across the whole project safely. So if I've got something which is being, which is named fairly similarly and the name's used in lots of places, I can rename it much more securely than if I just did find and replace. Which is really cool. Other useful things are things like safe delete. So I can I'm not sure I want this class anymore. I'm going to delete it, but just check to see if anybody's using it first, which is a good one. And also I can move the class around. I can pull methods in and out, and I can do proper refactorings without having to cut and paste and move things around and stuff like that. If we switch over to the C++ game, so we've got an Unreal project here, and this is, again, very similar look and feel there. It looks exactly the same. We've got our solution on the left here. If we're using a Unity game, we'll sort of split that down into assets and packages, so you get a view of it very much like in the Unity game itself. But for Unreal, we show you the solution there. Now, one thing which is really interesting here is that I'm on a Mac. And normally that wouldn't work because Unreal generates Visual Studio solution files, and of course Visual Studio as a whole isn't on the Mac, other than with Visual Studio for Mac. But what we can do with Rider is we can load up those projects, so we can understand. We don't load the Visual Studio project here. We actually load the U project file. So if I can open this, we can actually see now that the root of our project is our uproject file itself. And so we can actually load that directly and use that to load the whole project. We don't need to generate the Visual Solution project file here at all. And so we can load that, and we've got all of our files as you'd expect. If I go into my source, I've got my game, all my private files, my public files, and so for example, right, shoot a game. Then again, a fully syntax highlighted editor as you'd expect, collapsing and all that kind of stuff. And we've also got inspections and Alt Enter here. And again, we've got our Shift. And again, this is what we want to be able to use to be able to navigate around and go and find things. And so if we want to type controller, again, it'll go off and it'll search for all kinds of stuff. It'll search for files, for classes, for symbols, and for all kinds of other useful information. So if I wanted to go to my player controller, I can just navigate here and it will navigate around. And here as well, we can see, why am I quite so, lots of things being highlighted here. So yeah, again, we've got the inspections in our Unreal game as well. So we've got lots of highlights going on here, and we can say that these are being can be made const. This one is going to tell us to be the variable can be moved inside the if statement, which is very nice. And again, our Alt-Enter keyboard shortcut is the doing action here. And if we do that, we've got a quick fix for our action, and it can move us in there and sort of, again, make our code just a little bit more concise. And if we do Alt-Enter again, there's no inspections here, there's no squigglies as being shown, but it shows us that we've still got these entry points into all of our functionality. So we can navigate to something, refactor something, do inspections, and generate code as well. So I can navigate. Is this going to be a good thing to navigate? Let's do navigate on that one. And so from here, I'm on a method, and on the getShooterHUD function, I can navigate to the declaration of that, and just very quickly, it'll jump to it as well. Of course, with you can do the whole sort of control-click items as well and navigate to code there as well. Looks like I've navigated into the engine itself here. Yep, there we go. So we can index the code, index the engine, and navigate around and take you to lots of different places. Let's jump back to Unreal. Does anybody have any questions yet, by the way? I can see there's some comments in there. Anything that we want to cover just now? I think I'll just keep going. I'll just show some more stuff. However, I've completely forgotten what I was going to show next. The points. Oh yes, generating code. So we can see now we've got our Alt-Enter items here. So if I do it on this is paused, I've got options I can do on there, and down the bottom I've got my entry points to navigate and refactor and inspections. But I can also generate code as well, and we can do a whole load of interesting things here for generating. We can generate constructors, properties, overriding members, equality, and so on. And down the bottom here as well, we can generate Unity event functions. So this is really useful if you've got a mono behavior and you want to be able to generate code. You can then say, well, pick and choose whichever ones that you want to select. You can see there's some documentation down the bottom there as well, a little summary of what the method does. Select those, and it will very quickly generate those code for you. So we can do that nice and quickly, get you up and running, take away some of the boilerplate that's going on in there. In fact, we can see now that Awake is actually implemented in the base class there, and it's automatically called base for us. Of course, if I just get rid of that, we can, of course, do that ourselves as well. We can type Awake, and that'll override that, or we can do something like late update, and we can just type, and it will automatically generate these functions for us, which is pretty cool. Now, one of the things we can see here, though, is that these functions are grayed out. Awake is grayed out there because it's a redundant method. It's not doing anything other than calling base.awake, so we don't particularly care about that one. And we can do Alt-Enter again to remove our redundant override. But late update here, this is one of our event functions which Unity is calling. And in fact, we can see we've got a little hint here above us showing us that this is an event function that's being called every frame by Unity, but this one's being grayed out. And that's because Unity's calling it, but it's doing nothing. So if we had something in here, debug.log hello world, now we can see now it's no longer grayed out because it's doing something. But if the method itself is empty, then we're doing work when we don't need to be doing it. And so we've got an inspection here now to tell us we've got a redundant Unity event function. And again, we can Alt-Enter and clean that up. And in fact, we've got a lot of Unity-specific and Unreal-specific inspections. And so if I just quickly jump to some of these, I can show you some. So one of the nice ones I like to show, actually, I mean, this isn't an inspection, but it's a little feature that we've got for Unity support, is that we recognize Unity colors here as well. So if we've got, look at that, that is the, where are we? It's the color in Unity engine.color core module. There it is in the namespace Unity engine. So it's Unity engine.color, and we can see that it's red, and it's showing us the red, the green, the blue highlights. And if I do pick color from palette, I can actually, oh, that's gone, that didn't work. Oh, okay, that doesn't want to show that one for me now. Well then, if I, let's try this one instead, new color, 155622, whatever, that should now show me a highlight. It's decided to fail. There we go. We've got colors back in there. I'm not quite sure what's gone wrong there. But let's move on to something slightly different. You can't have a good demo if something doesn't go wrong. More interesting inspections that we've got for Unity are the things that we want to try and help you do at edit time that would normally happen only when you switch back to the Unity editor. So for example, here, if you call new on a mono behavior or a scriptable object, Unity is supposed to create these. Unity creates the object, wires it up with a native object behind it. And if you create a new one, that doesn't happen. But normally you wouldn't see this until you reach this point in your game, and then you get an error in the Unity console, which tells you that actually Unity should be creating this itself. We can show this in the editor for you. We show it as a warning there. And again, we can give you an Alt-Enter keyboard shortcut to convert it then to the right method. And this is going to be to add a component on a particular game object. We'll look around to see what game objects are available. You can use the game object passed in as a parameter there, or the object on this, and you can quickly select that and rewrite your code. Same thing for scriptable objects as well. So we can help you create those objects. And this is something that we want to try and do time and time again, is to try and stop you having to swap to the Unity editor or the Unreal editor and realize that you made a mistake and then have to swap back to the code editor to then fix it all there. So we want to try and find these issues up front and help you fix them. So things like classes, methods which are annotated with specific attributes, like this runtime initialize on load, that requires a static method. So we can then very quickly give an Alt-Enter to fix up the to fix up the missing static qualifier. Things like even do draw gizmo, which is expecting components in gizmo type, we can very quickly rewrite the code there to fix that code up for you. Similar things with other ones. So that one is saying incorrect method signature. So if you just fix that up, we're actually giving you a choice of two things here. We can either have a plain hash shortcut or something which takes an argument as well. We can do more useful stuff because we do a lot of indexing of your whole project. We can do more interesting things like magic strings there. So Unity has a lot of magic string happening going on in there. You can call methods with magic strings. You can also define things in the Unity editor, which you want to be able to use yourself. So tags, layers, input values as well, and we can help with that. So instead of you having to remember them, swap back to the editor, realize that it's wrong, come back to the code, we can show you what they are up front. So here, for example, we've got Unity engine, the input get axis, and this axis is unknown. We haven't defined this in the editor itself, and so that's probably not going to happen. What we can actually do is invoke code completion, and we can see the items that are available there as well. So it's like, okay, I wanted horizontal, and we can see now that the warning is gone. Similar thing with tags. We've got a player tag here, and we've got an unknown tag, and it's going to tell us that the unknown tag isn't available. And yet, it'll also give us the completion for all the tags that we have defined. which is very cool, even when you're comparing it against a string literal like this. Same with layers, same with scenes there. Lots of cool, useful stuff. And also then with methods too as well. So we've got, we're calling invoke on fire projectile. And in fact, I can do control click and navigate to the fire projectile method. And when I was doing find usages before, so if I do navigate to find usages, this is going to show me now everywhere that this fire projectile method is being used, even when it's being used inside a string, inside one of our magic strings, which is pretty cool. And in fact, what I can do is if I do rename on that fire projectile now, it'll rename the method and also where it's being used in string literals, which is a really useful way of trying to keep your methods correct there. What other cool things can we show? Lots of useful ones for things like redundant attributes. So if you've got a serialized field here which has got, well, if you accidentally assign it to a property, which is very easy to do, but not something that's actually going to work, we're going to show that it's redundant, that it's not actually going to work on there. If you've got serialized field and non-serialized, it'll tell you that it's not useful there. Things like initialize on load. If you've got don't have a static constructor, then there's no point to it. But we can now either remove the redundant attribute or create our static constructor there. So there's lots of things we can do there to sort of help you work with your code. Excuse me. More interesting ones are things we can do to help you with best practices, things which are related to performance, and things which are going to be, some of them are going to be micro optimizations, but when you are working inside an update loop that's going to be called very, very frequently, you might want to do this. Things like here, for example, we are repeatedly accessing the Euler angles property on transform. This is actually going to make a call to a native object. So this is actually repeatedly doing that is kind of inefficient. So we'll call that out and we'll actually say introduce a value, a variable, and it'll create a variable there. So you only have to access it once. And so you can do that. We can do the same sort of thing with position here as well. So we're repeatedly accessing position. So that's repeatedly going to go into native code to get a new copy of it. And we can introduce a property here. But what's interesting is that it's being used here, but we don't show a warning because we're actually modifying it via local position there as well. So it's smart enough to know what's going on and help with that. Similar kind of example with set float. This is setting an animator property and a shader property by a string name. But the first thing that this method is going to do is going to convert that into an integer ID. And so if you do that every single time, you might as well use the cache property index. And so we can then cache that as a static method up front and allow you to then use a more efficient method. Similar simple problems with things like comparing a tag against a string literal. This is going to allocate some memory there. It's going to call it's going to call into native code, allocate some memory, and it's much better to use the compare tag method. And you can do that very quickly with Alt Enter, or we can, as you saw before, we can actually do that in bulk and run that across a bunch of things. So if I fix it up across the whole function, we'll rewrite everything for you. Other useful ones are if you're instantiating a game object and setting the parent, the transform, then that's doing two different things, and it has to invalidate and rebuild an object as it goes. But we can actually combine that into a single call, and Unity can be more efficient with that and work better. Finally, I think for the inspections for Unity, and then we'll have a look at something else. We've got a performance context, which is a really interesting feature whereby we know that some parts of your code are being called much more frequently than others. So we know that the update method is going to be called every single frame, and that could be called very, very frequently. So you want to avoid expensive calls here. And here we're kind of trying to follow some of, again, Unity's best practices that they've published, and avoid some expensive calls inside a very frequently called method. So you can see here we've kind of highlight event functions with this little link here to show us the mono behavior is update is a method on money behavior. And in fact, if we click that, we can click on view documentation, and we'll get a link to the docs of what the method itself does. But you'll also see now, hopefully, if it's not too small, that we've got a little fire icon there as well. We can show that it's a hot method. It's going to be called very, very frequently. And therefore, we want to avoid doing anything too expensive. And we can see we now got these highlights on this get component, for example, there. We've got this orange underline. This is a different kind of highlight than what we normally show, which is the squiggly warnings. And this one is just a bit of information. It's not saying there's something wrong. There's not something you need to fix necessarily, but you might want to take a look at this. Get component is expensive, and you don't really want to be calling it every frame. So we highlight that to show you that it's an expensive method, and you might want to look at this in a profiler. You might want to measure it to see whether it is expensive, whether it's something you particularly care about and want to re-architect your system for, or whether it's something that's absolutely fine. Similar sort of thing with camera.main. I know camera.main was made more efficient in recent versions, but it's still doing a bit of a lookup, which you perhaps don't want to be doing every single frame. We can actually do this sort of transitively as well, which is rather cool. So we're highlighting here reset enemy. And if we navigate to that now, we can see that's because reset enemy is calling get component. And if we go to, in fact, I think it's find target, which then calls reset enemy, we can see that it's doing there. And we can see now that reset enemy is also being highlighted as frequently called. And if we click this now, we can see, well, why is it being frequently called? And we can actually see, let me just show you that again before that. If we click on this method, this frequently called annotation here, we can see we've got this show incoming performance call, critical calls. And clicking that will then show us our call tree of where it's being called there. You can see it's being called reset enemy, it's called by find target. And if we open that, we can see it's being called by update. And then we know that update is very, very frequently called. And there we can see now our entire call stack. So if ever you're in Rider, sort of deep in your code somewhere, and you see this is being highlighted as frequently called, and it's a bit of I'm curious as to why, click that link and then you can navigate it. You can also disable the performance analysis for it as well. And you can also say, actually, I don't care about this. Reset enemy is not going to be called that often. So don't worry about it. It's not expensive. And now we add this comment here, and that sort of propagates around as well. And we can see that the highlights have gone. So it's a very useful way of giving you some information that there might be a performance problem here. It's not telling you there's something wrong. It's just giving you a hint about something that is useful. I think that's enough Unity for now. Let's give a bit of Unreal a go. Or have we got a question?
There were a few questions in the thread, so I think maybe we could answer them before we kind of running out of time in 10 minutes with the demo and don't have time for that. So the question first was like, can you show an example when you want to use basic completion via smart completion? So generally, can you show maybe some difference between them where one is better than another, really?
Yeah, so basic completion versus, what was the completion you said, sorry?
Just smart completion, yeah.
Yeah, so the idea here is basic completion is just going to complete something. Here, what have I got in the, so if I start typing, I can get item. That's my sort of basic completion there, because it's trying to find what's available in the local area. If I want to use smart completion, then let's say I've got a string of name there, and in my method up here, I know this is going to break things, but this is just an example. String, I don't know, output. It doesn't like that because, yeah, okay, because update isn't there. Here, if I wanted to do basic completion, then I would get a whole lot of everything. So I've got things like, reference equals get in whatever print, it's got all of those. Whereas what I can do is I can just do smart completion instead, which is a different keyboard shortcut. And what that does, it'll narrow down the things that we show to things which match the type of what I'm after. So normally we will complete anything and everything that's in the current context. But here now we're trying to complete just the things that are in string. So here it's giving me output because that's a string. It's got name, it's got tag, and it's useful things I can do. It's also given me methods that can return me a string or a type of T in the local context. And it's just a narrow set of options to give. And so that can then be a bit smarter and a bit more useful in the things it can show you. But the other interesting thing is what you should really just do is just start typing. What we've tried to do is make it so that the automatic completion is a bit of both. It kind of gives you all of the things that you want. So it gives you all the things in the local context, but it will sort of prioritize the things which are of the right type. You might ask why we don't have smart completion on all the time. And the reason is smart completion here doesn't allow me to complete a method call that might return something that I can then use to get a string from. So I can't sort of do that. So if I had, where are we? We've got camera.main.name. I bet that's probably a thing. So camera.main.name, I can use that to complete. But if I do smart completion, then camera isn't in there. So I can't do that. So normal completion is supposed to kind of give us all the informations, but yeah. I've lost my train of thought there.
Okay.
That helps.
We have a few more questions, so maybe run through them. So there was some discussion about the themes, like dark and light theme, and I maybe would like just to comment here that the people might kind of be a little bit confused about, like, because they say that the dark theme is only available in the paid version. That's about the Unity, not about Rider. In Rider, you have them both, and you even have theme plugins, so you can actually have all custom colors you ever dreamed about in your IDE, and you can use this custom theme, or you can get something from the marketplace. So, and select between many color themes available. So yeah, here is the dark theme if you prefer the dark theme, because like, yeah, Matt, they ask you to use the dark theme.
Yeah, I find that it's better to demo. I use the dark theme personally, but it's better to demo it in the light theme because the contrast is usually better if you're, even if you're on a smaller screen.
Yeah, same for me.
Yeah, light.
Yeah,
presenting
me, right.
light is better.
Okay, there is a question about the naming convention. So I noticed Rider tends to favor Microsoft naming convention over Unity. I tend to favor Microsoft too, and Rider always suggests I change member names to use an underscore, for example. Can we choose?
Yes. So we've got in the preferences, we've got, if you just search for naming, you can go to code styling C#, and then we've got a whole bunch of different interesting naming conventions that you can have here. You can specify these through editor config as well, or you can edit these and have them how you want. So you can have an instance field, for example, being in lower camel case there. And I've also got an additional thing here. You can add extra rules here so that you can have multiple rules. It'll prefer the first one, but then it'll also say, this is fine, I'm not going to complain about it. So if I wanted to add in another one, which had an underscore prefix and was all lowercase, then it would no longer complain about that. The one sort of awkward thing there is that this little bit of UI here isn't customizable by plugins, so the Unity support can't add its own custom rule into there as well. So the Unity support has a naming rule for serialized fields, and we can add it here. So I can add in a prefix of Unity underscore, and if I just save that now, and if I have a public string my serialized field, can't type. Now we should get a warning to say actually that should be Unity underscore my serialized field, because I had the wrong naming field there. And in fact, if I go to this inspection naming, inconsistent naming, and I go to change naming rule there, this should take me to the actual editor there. So I can now remove that prefix and it will now tell me it's correct. A similar thing, if we have this with a non-serialized, then it's actually going to have a different naming convention. It should actually tell me that should be capitals, but I think I've probably changed my rules too much now. And so you can have separate separate naming rules for serialized and non-serialized fields.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So we have maybe just a couple more minutes. I don't know, maybe if you want to demo something or you want to answer some other questions before we run to Tom's presentation next.
Well, I ran a little bit out of time on some for showing some Unreal stuff. So then very quickly, I think I want to just show some very cool things in Unreal here, which is that we've got integration with blueprints. I'm in the wrong file. Pickup. One is that we will index your blueprint files as well. And once this wakes up, you can see here we've got a link here which tells me that this class is being used in 3 blueprint classes here as well: pickup, health, ammo, launcher, and ammo gun. And if I had Unity running now, if I click those, it would navigate to and open the blueprint editor for that. And it also shows me down here fields that are being used inside the blueprint there and what the values are. So we're using P-launcher ammo and so on here for these particular particle systems. This respawn time down here is being used in 2 items. So in default pickup ammo launcher C and gun there, it's got the value of 20, it's got the value of 5 in these particular assets there. It's a really, really cool feature of bringing your sort of serialized data into your editor, sort of keeping it, showing you what the values are in your editor while you're using the code. Unity does something very similar as well, and it shows you the values which are being used in assets of your serialized fields, and it's a really, really cool feature.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Matt. So thank you very much for your demo, for your cool presentation. I think it's time to move on.